It started like any ordinary day, but everything changed when a citizen was stopped and asked for ID. The encounter quickly escalated, with the officers insisting on compliance. But what they didn't expect was someone who knew their rights inside and out. Calm yet firm, the citizen questioned the authority behind the request, leaving the officers visibly caught off guard. The tension in the air was undeniable as bystanders began to notice the unfolding exchange, their curiosity growing with every passing moment. The officers' initial confidence started to waver, their demands met with unwavering composure and well-informed responses. This wasn't just a simple ID check anymore. It had become a battle of knowledge and principles. Just when it seemed like the officers would assert control, the citizen delivered a statement so compelling, it left everyone speechless. What happened next? Let's dive into the moment that turned the tables completely. It started like any ordinary day, but everything changed when a citizen was stopped and asked for ID. The encounter quickly escalated, with the officers insisting on compliance. But what they didn't expect was someone who knew their rights inside and out. Calm yet firm, the citizen questioned the authority behind the request, leaving the officers visibly caught off guard. The tension in the air was undeniable as bystanders began to notice the unfolding exchange, their curiosity growing with every passing moment. The officers' initial confidence started to waver, their demands met with unwavering composure and well-informed responses. This wasn't just a simple ID check anymore. It had become a battle of knowledge and principles. Just when it seemed like the officers would assert control, the citizen delivered a statement so compelling, it left everyone speechless. What happened next? Let's dive into the moment that turned the tables completely. Sure, let's dive right in and continue the story with a focus on building tension and deepening the main conflict while exploring subplots naturally. Here's the continuation. The night was darker than usual, with heavy clouds pressing against the skyline, blocking out the faint glow of the moon. Liam's footsteps echoed on the uneven pavement as he hurried down the empty street, the weight of what he had just discovered pounding in his chest like a drum. He could still feel the cold metal of the key in his pocket, a key that didn't belong to him, but held the power to unravel secrets too dangerous to ignore. He glanced over his shoulder. The streetlights flickered behind him, casting long, shifting shadows that seemed to follow him no matter how quickly he walked. Somewhere in the distance, a car engine roared to life, and Liam couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Back at the warehouse earlier, everything had seemed routine at first. The shipments came in, inventory was checked, and the usual hum of forklifts filled the air. But then there was the locked room, the one everyone avoided, as if it didn't exist. Liam hadn't meant to stumble upon it, but curiosity had gotten the better of him. That's when he saw it, a faint glow seeping through the crack beneath the door, accompanied by muffled voices. He didn't hear what they were saying, but the tone was sharp, filled with urgency and something else, fear, maybe. Before he could get too close, the door opened, and a man stepped out. Tall, broad-shouldered, and wearing a sharp black suit, the man's eyes swept the room with the precision of someone who knew exactly what to look for. Liam had ducked behind a stack of crates just in time, his heart hammering as he watched the man lock the door behind him and slip the key into his jacket pocket. It had taken all of Liam's nerve to follow him unnoticed and lift the key when the man wasn't looking. Now, hours later, Liam wasn't sure whether that had been a bold move or a reckless one. Either way, he knew there was no turning back. At the same time, across town, Clara was trying to make sense of her own discoveries. She had been digging into the accounts for weeks, convinced something wasn't adding up. Money was vanishing from the ledgers, large sums, routed through obscure channels that always ended in dead ends. She had brought it up to her boss, but the warning look he gave her made it clear that asking too many questions wasn't in her best interest. But Clara couldn't let it go. The discrepancies weren't just mistakes. They were deliberate. And now she had proof, a USB drive filled with documents she wasn't supposed to have. She stared at it, her mind racing with the implications. If what she had found was true, it wasn't just about missing money. This was about power, control, and a web of corruption that stretched far beyond her imagination. Meanwhile, Liam's best friend, Danny, was facing his own dilemma. He had always been the cautious one, the voice of reason whenever Liam's impulsive nature got them into trouble. But now Danny had his own secrets. He hadn't told Liam about the anonymous messages he'd been receiving, the ones warning him to stay away from the warehouse, from Liam, from everything. The messages were vague, but the underlying threat was clear. Danny had thought about ignoring them, but then a package arrived on his doorstep. Inside was a photograph of Liam, taken just hours earlier. It wasn't a warning anymore, it was a promise. As the night wore on, their lives began to intertwine in ways none of them could have anticipated. Liam, driven by his need to uncover the truth, found himself standing outside the locked room once more, the stolen key in hand. Clara, unable to stay silent, decided to confront the one person who might have answers, even if it put her in danger. And Danny, torn between loyalty and fear, made a choice that would change everything. The air was thick with tension, every step forward pulling them deeper into a world they weren't prepared for. None of them realized just how far the reach of their enemies extended, or how much was at stake if they failed. But as the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, one thing became clear. The secrets they were uncovering weren't just dangerous, they were deadly. The storm rolled in without warning, wind rattling windows and rain pounding against the streets like a warning no one could ignore. Liam stood in the shadows, his back pressed against the damp brick wall of the alley, his breath shallow as he clutched the key tightly in his hand. The warehouse loomed ahead, dark and silent, but he knew better now. It wasn't empty, and whatever was inside that locked room wasn't meant to be found. He glanced at his phone, the screen cracked from a fall earlier. No messages from Danny. No word from Clara. It had been hours since they had last spoken, and the silence was heavy, gnawing at his nerves. The plan had been simple, too simple, maybe. Clara was supposed to distract her boss long enough for Liam to get inside, while Danny kept an eye out for anything unusual. But the longer he waited, the more he realized how wrong this could all go. Inside the building, Clara's heart raced as she sat across from her boss in his corner office. The documents she had printed were folded neatly in her bag, hidden beneath layers of meaningless papers she carried to make her presence seem routine. He watched her with a calm, calculated expression that made her stomach twist. She had rehearsed her questions, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she nodded at his casual remarks, her eyes flicking to the clock on the wall. Her boss leaned back in his chair, his fingers drumming lightly against the desk. "You've been asking a lot of questions lately, Clara," he said, his voice smooth but sharp around the edges. "It's good to be curious, but sometimes curiosity gets misinterpreted." Clara forced a smile, her pulse quickening. She could feel the tension rising, the unspoken threat lingering in his words. She needed to keep him distracted for just a little longer. Danny, parked 2 blocks away, checked his phone again. The messages had stopped, but the last one still haunted him. Asterisk, you can't save him if you don't stop him, asterisk. He didn't know who had sent it, or how they knew what Lion was planning, but the meaning was clear. He could leave now, walk away before things got worse, but every instinct told him he couldn't abandon Liam. He looked out the window, his fingers drumming nervously on the steering wheel. The rain was coming down harder now, blurring his view of the street. A figure in a dark coat passed by, their hood pulled low. For a moment, Danny thought they glanced in his direction, but when he blinked, they were gone. Back at the warehouse, Liam slipped inside through the side entrance, the key cold and heavy in his hand. The air was damp and smelled faintly of oil and rust. He moved quickly, his footsteps muffled by the sound of the rain hammering the roof. Every shadow seemed alive, every creak of the old floorboards sending a jolt of adrenaline through his veins. He reached the door at the end of the corridor. The faint glow was still there, pulsing softly, and the low hum of machinery vibrated through the walls. Taking a deep breath, he inserted the key into the lock, his hands trembling. The door clicked open, revealing a sight that made his breath catch. Rows of monitors lined the walls, each screen flickering with images, street cameras, building interiors, faces he recognized. In the center of the room was a table covered in maps, files, and photographs, all connected by lines of red string that crisscrossed in a chaotic web. At the heart of it all was a single word scrawled in bold letters. ****. Before Liam could process what he was seeing, a voice spoke behind him. "I was wondering how long it would take you to get here." Liam spun around, the blood draining from his face as he came face to face with the man from earlier, the one who had locked the door. His sharp suit was gone, replaced by a tactical jacket that made it clear he wasn't here for negotiation. "You have no idea what you've just stepped into," the man said, his voice calm but laced with menace. "And now you've made it worse, for all of us." At that moment, Clara's boss stood from his chair, his eyes narrowing as he looked at her. "You know," he said, his voice dropping, "I've always admired your determination. But there's a line, Clara, one you shouldn't cross." The sound of the office door locking behind her sent a chill down her spine. Outside, Danny finally decided to leave the car. He couldn't wait any longer. He grabbed the flashlight from the glove compartment and stepped into the storm, the rain soaking through his jacket in seconds. As he approached the warehouse, he thought he saw movement inside, a flicker of shadows against the windows. He quickened his pace, unaware of the figure trailing behind him. The night had taken on a life of its own, the storm masking the danger that lurked in every corner. Each of them was now caught in a tightening web of deception, unaware of just how much closer they were to colliding with the truth, and the consequences that came with it. The man's eyes bore into Liam, his calm exterior masking the dangerous energy crackling beneath the surface. Liam didn't know whether to run, fight, or try to talk his way out. But before he could decide, the man stepped closer, gesturing toward the tangled web of files and monitors. "You think you're clever, don't you?" the man said, his tone sharp. "Sneaking in here, taking that key. But this," he motioned to the room, "this isn't what you think it is. You don't even know what you're standing in the middle of." Liam swallowed hard, glancing back at the screens. His mind raced to piece together the fragments of what he'd uncovered. The faces on the monitors weren't just random people. They were connected somehow, figures he recognized from the warehouse, from Clara's office, even from his neighborhood. He thought about the words scrawled across the map. ***exposure**. Was this some kind of operation to monitor everyone? Or something worse? "I don't know what's going on," Liam said finally, his voice steadier than he felt, "but I'm not walking away from this." The man's expression flickered, just for a moment, as if Liam's defiance had caught him off guard. But before he could respond, a faint crackle echoed through his earpiece. He pressed a hand to his ear, listening intently. Then, without warning, he grabbed Liam by the arm and pulled him into the corner of the room, his grip like iron. "Stay quiet," he hissed. Liam barely had time to react before the door creaked open, and two figures entered the room. They were dressed in black, their faces partially obscured by masks. Their movements were precise, practiced as they scanned the room. One of them reached for a switch on the wall, and the monitors flickered off, plunging the room into darkness except for the glow of the map. "What's taking so long?" one of them asked, their voice low but agitated. "We've got a problem," the other replied, pulling a small device from their pocket. "The signal's been compromised. Someone's inside." Liam's pulse quickened as he realized the device in their hand wasn't just any tracker. It was scanning for heat signatures. His mind raced. If they found him and the man hiding in the corner, there was no telling what would happen. Meanwhile, across town, Clara's confrontation with her boss was taking a darker turn. The locked office door and